On April 10th, the Ustashi came from Italy, the Ustashi core group, maybe 100 people or 200, I don't know. So they came to power when the Germans had occupied Zagreb. It's very simple. There was this huge explosion in the central post office, which serves all of Croatia. Okay. After lunch, we took the tram from the central square, and the tram stopped after half a station, immediately after the square, because there was the post office, and we didn't know why the tram stopped. It was closed. It was 2 or 3 o'clock on a summer afternoon. I remember the sun rays slanting in. You know, it wasn't very hot. It was a very nice Zagreb summer before we ruined the climate situation. But you stopped there for what seemed to me an eternity, and something was happening. The whole street was full of Ustash uniforms, and I think German uniforms too, and police cars and so on and so on. Everybody was milling around. So my father and my mother and I had, of course, the yellow star sign, and we were sitting there nobody came in to say anything, just it was closed, all the doors were closed, all the windows were closed. We just looked at each other, we didn't speak, but it was obvious that now they could. An 11-year-old boy doesn't know what will happen. You have to sit still and hope nothing horrible happens, and the world turns black and white or gray. But my memory selected a black and white movie I saw in Italian in Korčula about Flash Gordon. And it was called Flash Gordon on Mars. Flash and his friends, I think his girlfriend and Dr. Zarkov, his mentor, go through a tunnel, very oppressive, dark tunnel. You're enclosed, you know, a mud tunnel. And they are being threatened by the mud people. And the people the people step out from the walls and begin hunting you.
We daren't go that way on account of the pirates. This way, Zarkov.
The reality was the dark gods were in power, and you never knew when they would strike. They immediately started killing. Actually, their first priority was killing Serbs. It seems to me retrospectively that it defined my life, the experience, what it is to live under racism and fascism. They took over the Nuremberg laws, holus bolus, you know. They were forbidden to do this and to do that, to have any shop or whatever, you know. So practically how you existed was your own business. If you had some savings or if you had some family, okay, if not, not. It was a mixture of the banal and the truly horrible. I can today understand that you are faced with a spectrum of possibilities. The most immediately available one for the large public, in the opinion of the movie makers, at any rate of Hollywood, is horror. Okay? But you also are in another world, and there are good possibilities in science fiction. Okay, there are adventures where your hero can do something, you know, and so on. Let us say Heinlein Le Guin type. Okay, Heinlein on the right wing, Le Guin on the left, but still in a kind of, our hero has an adventure in other worlds. Well, it was a comfortable feeling that there were other worlds too. and not only this one. Well, at some point of my life, when I was writing about science fiction, somebody asked me, why are you so interested in what should one call it, socio-political aspects and effects of science fiction? And I said, that is very easy. Just imagine. From 1938 to 1946, I have lived under the following regimes. First, a monarchist dictatorship in Yugoslavia. Secondly, a compromise with the Croatian Peasant Party, by which a sub-region of Croatia was allowed some autonomy in 38-39. Thirdly, the occupation by German Hitlerites in 1941 after a short and very inglorious war. Fourthly, the installation of the fascist Croatian Ustashi regime, which is probably the worst in the world, even more horrible than the Nazis. Fifth, an internment by the Italian army, a confinato in the city of Korčula, on the island of Korčula. Because in Korčula there was already established a kind of little colony of refugees, partly Viennese, like Čokor and Sacher Masoch, and partly Viennese, non-Jewish, by the way, and partly Jewish from Zagreb mainly, but also from other parts, from Sarajevo and so on. So this was known that the Italians gave you a permit to be a confinato. Confinato means within the borders of the city of Korčula. And then it was your business how you survived. You had to register. Whether you had to pay something per year, I have no idea. If so, it wasn't too much. So that was the kind of lowest kind of concentration measure, where you had your own house. If you had money, then you ate. If not, not. Our neighbor was the Italian, the neighboring house was the Italian army, singing at night and drinking wine.
What were they singing?
Hanno bevuto I nostri padri, sì, e noi che figli siamo, beviamo, beviamo, beviamo. You know, the choral kind of, I don't know which division it was. It would be easy to find it from which part of Italy. And the good side of the Italian army was that it was highly corruptible. How should I say, a life bordering on the extraordinary, but also very banal. I decided to become an atheist in Korčula, you know. Well, you just had the normal 11-year-old problems. I began reading Jules Verne, right? Everybody at the age of 11 in all of Europe read Jules Verne. In the, let's say, middle and upper classes, okay?
And which one do you remember? Was it the voyage under?
Anything that came to my hand, you couldn't, there was no difference between science fiction and non-science. It were just adventure stories, adventure for the youth, you know. They were pretty good, I mean. There's a famous saying by Apollinaire about Jules Verne's style. What a style, only nouns. You know, when he under the sea and he gives you the names of all the fish and so on. So it's a thick world. Yeah. It's a full world. The Italian army had a strange relationship to fascism. On the one hand, it was of course very happy if it could conquer some colonies by poisoning poor Abyssinians, you know. On the other hand, it was the king's army, not the duchess. So it had some elements of old-fashioned 18th century Piemontese Enlightenment, like you don't kill people on race reasons and so on. You know, that is an army doesn't do that. An army fights other armies. That is the ethos officially. Now, of course, they transgress this ethos 100% when dealing with the partisans, because those were bandits and killed on sight. And they burned all the olive groves. I was looking at how much can you see from Korčula, 20 kilometers burning, you know, 15, I don't know. Burning for 2 or 3 days, you know, that was fascism in practice. How many people they shot, I have no idea. People fled, and you know, to the hinterland. But at any rate, it was. It was a sight that could make you long for other worlds, no? And the partisans evacuated the islands, 40,000 non-combatants, women, children, and intellectuals, to the Sinai Desert, a famous El Shat camp, which the English thought would go over to the royalists and in fact remain communists to the end, and everybody more or less came back. As a side effect to that, one fishing boat was found for the Jewish community or the refugee community, I think one, so far as I know, only one, to go to Bari, with German bombers overhead and the minefields in the Adriatic Italian one. Nobody knew, nobody had charts. You know, if you survive, you survive. If you don't, you don't. You know. So we had to. Now, there was some negotiation, probably, I imagine today, between the refugee community and the partisan command on. I saw the guy was in command. He was called Gatto, in Italian, a Dalmatian in Italian. Okay, cat, you know. Or maybe that was his nom de guerre, but I think it was his real name. And they negotiated, and they said, well, you know, if you let us go, and the partisans said, okay, except for the doctors, because we need them. So my father was drafted without any complaints. I think he was very ready to go. And so my father went to a partisan unit as a doctor, never mind the teeth. They had nobody, you know, and how he survived. My father is 1 foot smaller than me, and I'm not that huge. He's a gracile city boy. How he survived 2 winters. So is it difficult to imagine other, you just call it a world instead of a different type of rule. It's not really difficult if you are a young man with a halfway good imagination, as any science fiction fan would have been. So I said to myself, what is this kind of thing called science fiction like? What superordinated or subordinated categories does it fit in? Now, working on Brecht wrote a huge theoretical work in 1945-46 called The Small Organon for the Theater, Kleines Organon, where he defined his attitude as scientific. And a few years later, having lived under the officially scientific socialism under GDR, he had some qualms and said, well, science, no, maybe, you know, one should call it something else. And I had the same qualms. The term science had been corrupted, number 1, by capitalist technology, the atom bomb and so on. Number 2, by Stalinism claiming to be scientific. It was unusable theoretically anymore. It was fraught with blood, sweat and tears. Okay, so what do we substitute for science? Well, we substitute a superordinated category, which is cognition or understanding. You know, which science can be a good or a bad subcategory depending on how you see it. And what do we substitute for fiction happening in other worlds? Well, Brecht's estrangement, Verfremdung. So, that's my famous definition of cognitive estrangement, for better or worse. I suppose that I was writing about an ideal kind of science fiction which would fulfill its possibilities and get as near to its ideal horizon as possible. The horizon was one of a classless society, it's quite clear.